Michael lived in Springfield, a small and quiet town in Ohio, USA. It was a place with calm streets, friendly neighbors, and familiar faces everywhere. Children rode their bikes in the evenings. Families grilled food in their backyards during weekends, and people waved at each other even if they were strangers. Life in Springfield felt safe, ordinary, and predictable, and that was the world Michael knew well. He was 17, tall, slim, and full of energy. He had a playful smile that made people feel relaxed around him. Michael loved to make others laugh. His classmates said he could brighten any dull moment, and his teachers often told him he joked too much. If there was laughter in the hallway, Michael was usually the reason. If a friend felt sad, Michael was the first to crack a joke and make things lighter. He lived with his mother and his younger sister, Emily. Their father worked in another city and only came home a few times each year, so Michael felt like he needed to step up and be responsible, even though he still acted like a carefree teenager outside the house. Every morning, he woke up early, helped his mother with small chores, and walked Emily to her school before heading to his own high school. His days followed the same pattern: school, friends, jokes, chores, and evenings spent on the porch listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood. Even though he loved pranks, Michael had a good heart. He helped Mrs. Parker, their elderly neighbor, carry groceries. He shared his lunch with classmates who forgot theirs. He comforted people when life felt heavy. Everyone trusted him, and everyone believed he meant well. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. Michael loved pranks a little too much. He never intended harm. His pranks were small: hiding a friend's notebook, pretending to trip in the hallway, tapping someone on the shoulder, and walking away. His group of friends found it hilarious, and together they called themselves the Jokers. They believed fun made life better. Among his friends, there was one boy who admired him more than anyone: Daniel. Daniel was shorter, quieter, and more serious, but he followed Michael everywhere. He wanted to be confident like him, noticed like him, and liked the way Michael was. Michael never realized how much Daniel copied him. He only enjoyed having someone who always laughed at his jokes. Life continued smoothly until one sunny Friday afternoon when things changed. School had just closed, and students were excited because Monday was a holiday. Michael and his friends gathered near the parking lot, laughing loudly. Someone complained that their class prefect, Samuel, had been acting too strict. Samuel was tall, calm, and serious. Teachers trusted him completely, but many students found him annoying because he always reported noisemakers and rule breakers. One boy joked, "We should scare Samuel a little so he chills out." Everyone laughed. Then Daniel said something that shifted the moment. "What if we prank him? Nothing crazy, just something to make him panic a bit." Michael's eyes brightened. The boys leaned closer. They waited for Michael, their leader in jokes, to speak. He thought for a moment. Then he suggested a prank that sounded harmless, funny, exciting. The boys cheered. They felt bold. They felt clever. They felt unstoppable. None of them imagined fear. None of them imagined danger. None of them imagined that someone's life would soon hang in the balance. But sometimes life changes in one small decision. And this prank, this simple plan meant for laughter, would soon go terribly, terribly wrong. It would lead to screaming. It would lead to blood. It would lead to a desperate ambulance ride. It would lead to someone almost dying. And Michael, the boy who only wanted to make people laugh, would soon carry a guilt that would follow him for years. The group of boys walked away from the school building and gathered behind the gym, where students usually stood to talk before going home. The air was warm, and the sun reflected off the metal doors. Michael stood in the middle while the others formed a loose circle around him. They were excited, almost buzzing, waiting to hear more about the prank. Daniel looked at Michael with eager eyes, like a younger brother waiting for approval. The others whispered, laughed, and nudged one another. They all trusted Michael to come up with something unforgettable. Michael explained the idea. His voice was light, casual, playful, like someone telling a joke, not someone planning something that could change lives. The plan was simple. They would make Samuel believe that someone had stolen his backpack. They would hide it in the old storage shed behind the football field, then watch from a distance while he panicked. Later, they would return it and laugh together. It was supposed to be funny, harmless, and temporary. At least that's how it sounded. The boys nodded and laughed. No one questioned it. No one thought about consequences. No one imagined fear or danger. Daniel spoke first. That will be so funny. Samuel will run around like crazy looking for it. Another boy added, He deserves it. He reports people too much. Michael smiled, proud that everyone liked the idea. He felt like a leader, someone people listened to. It made him feel important. But there was one thing none of them considered. Samuel always carried something precious inside his backpack. They didn't know. They didn't ask. They didn't think it mattered. The bell on the school wall rang softly in the distance, signaling that the building was closing for the day. Students began leaving the compound. Cars honked as parents picked up their children. The boys started walking toward the hallway where Samuel usually left his bag during after-school cleanup duty. As they moved, something unusual happened. Michael felt a tiny hesitation in his chest. It was small, almost nothing, like a quiet voice telling him to stop, to rethink, to walk away. But he pushed it aside. He told himself it was only a prank, and nobody would get hurt. They reached the hallway, and just as expected, Samuel's backpack was sitting by the wall while he swept the classroom. The boys peeked through the window and saw him with headphones on, lost in his task, unaware of anything happening behind him. Perfect, Daniel whispered. Michael stepped forward and picked up the bag. It felt slightly heavier than he expected, but he didn't think about it. They hurried away down the back corridor, laughing and shoving each other as excitement grew. They crossed the school field, passed the bleachers, and reached the old storage shed. It was a faded wooden structure that hardly anyone used anymore. The door squeaked loudly when they opened it. Inside, it smelled like dust and old gym mats. Put it in there, one boy said. Michael placed the backpack on top of a broken cardboard box. They didn't know the shed's base wood was weak. They didn't know the floorboards had rotted over time. They didn't know that one wrong step could be dangerous. They turned to leave, still laughing, still proud of themselves. Then Daniel said the words that changed everything again. We should lock it with the hook outside, so he can't get it too fast. The boys cheered at the idea. Michael hesitated again, but only for a second. Okay, he said. Daniel closed the shed door and slid the rusted metal hook into place. It clicked. And with that sound, the prank became something different. Something heavier, something dangerous. Something that would soon spiral far beyond what any of them expected. The boys ran back toward the schoolyard, ready to watch Samuel panic. They positioned themselves behind a parked school bus where they could see the hallway entrance. A few minutes later, Samuel stepped outside, carrying his broom, ready to go home. He reached for his backpack, but it wasn't there. He froze. Then he began looking around. His face tightened with confusion. The boys covered their mouths to stop their laughter, shaking with excitement. It was working, just like they imagined. Samuel walked faster, checking corners, asking passing students if they had seen it. His voice grew tense. Then something none of them expected happened. Samuel suddenly began running, fast, not just worried, not just searching, terrified. The boys' smiles slowly faded. Something felt wrong. Something was different from what they imagined. Samuel wasn't annoyed. He was panicking, truly panicking, like something important was at risk. He sprinted across the field toward the shed. The boys looked at one another. Why is he acting like that? What's inside the bag? Should we stop him? Maybe it's fine. Michael's heart beat faster. Something inside him whispered again. Louder this time. Something is wrong. Samuel reached the shed and pulled at the door, hard. It didn't open. He pulled again. His breathing became sharp and loud. His hands trembled. His voice shook as he called out, Please! Please open! The boys stepped out from behind the bus, fear slowly replacing excitement. And that was when everything changed in one terrible instant. Samuel pulled the door again, too hard. The weak wood of the shed shifted. The floor inside cracked, and Samuel fell. There was a loud crash, then silence, then a scream, not from Samuel but from Daniel. Michael! He fell. He's not moving! The boys froze. Their bodies went cold, their stomachs twisted. The prank was no longer funny, no longer harmless, no longer a joke. Samuel was hurt, trapped, and possibly dying. For a moment, nobody moved. The air felt heavy, and everything around them seemed to freeze. The field, the school building, even the sounds of students talking in the distance. Michael stared at the shed, his heart pounding so loudly he could hear it in his ears. Daniel took a shaky step forward. "We have to help him," he whispered, his voice breaking. The boys ran toward the shed, their feet stumbling over the grass. When they reached the door, Michael pulled the hook loose with trembling hands. The door swung open, and the sight inside made all of them gasp. Samuel was lying halfway through a broken section of the floor. The wood had collapsed beneath him, and one of his legs was trapped between the boards. His eyes were closed, and he wasn't moving. "Samuel!" Michael shouted, his voice shaking. He knelt beside him and gently touched his shoulder. No response. Daniel's hands flew to his head. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," he repeated, his voice rising. One of the boys stepped back, fear taking over. "We need a teacher!" Michael shook his head quickly. "No, we can fix it! We can get him out!" But deep inside, he knew they couldn't fix this. His chest felt tight, and guilt rushed through him like fire. He tried to lift Samuel, but the broken wood held him in place. The more they pulled, the more the boards dug into Samuel's leg. Samuel let out a weak sound, half pain, half breath, and his eyes opened for just a second before closing again. "He's hurt," Daniel cried. Michael felt tears pushing into his eyes. He wasn't the boy who cried easily, but this was different. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was real. Too real. "We need help," Michael whispered. Then he stood up and ran. He didn't care who saw him. He didn't care what would happen to him. He didn't care about detention, suspension, or punishment. All he cared about was that Samuel might die if they didn't get help fast. He sprinted toward the school office, breathing hard, pushing through the doors. The secretary looked up, startled. "Samuel, he fell? The shed? He's hurt? He's not waking up." Michael gasped. The secretary jumped up and called for the school nurse. A teacher heard and rushed out the door. Another staff member grabbed a phone and dialed emergency services. Michael stood there shaking, his hands cold, his stomach twisting. It was his fault. He had suggested the prank. He had picked up the backpack. He had ignored the voice inside that told him to stop. The nurse and two teachers ran across the field toward the shed. Michael followed behind them, his legs weak. When they reached Samuel, the nurse knelt beside him and checked his breathing. "He's alive," she said, but her face was serious. The teachers carefully lifted pieces of wood, trying not to hurt Samuel more. When they finally freed his leg, he groaned weakly, his face pale and tight with pain. "Call his parents," the nurse shouted. "They already called an ambulance," one of the boys answered. Michael felt dizzy. The world around him felt blurry and distant. Students gathered nearby, whispers spreading quickly. "What happened? Did he fall? Who was there? Who did this?" Michael heard their voices, but they sounded far away. Then came the sound that made everything real, the sharp wail of an ambulance siren growing louder as it approached the school gates. The nurse touched Samuel's face gently. "Stay with us, Samuel. Just stay with us." Michael watched as the paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. They lifted Samuel carefully, speaking in calm but urgent voices. One of them asked what happened, and the nurse explained that the floor collapsed. Nobody mentioned the prank. Not yet. Michael's hands shook harder as Samuel was carried toward the ambulance. His backpack, still covered in dust, was carried along with him. As the paramedics placed him inside, something slipped from the side pocket and fell to the ground. A small plastic container. Michael picked it up with trembling fingers. There was a label on it. Insulin. His stomach dropped. His breath stopped. Samuel had diabetes. He needed the insulin. He wasn't just scared about a missing backpack. He was in danger without it. Michael felt his knees weaken. This wasn't just a prank gone wrong. This was life or death. And it was because of him. The ambulance doors closed and it drove away with flashing lights. The boys stood silently, their faces pale. Then a teacher turned to them slowly. "What were you doing near that shed?" No one answered. The weight of the truth pressed down on all of them. Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out, because saying it out loud would make it real. And he wasn't ready for real. Not yet. The school grounds felt different after the ambulance left, quieter, heavier, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Students stood in small groups, whispering. Teachers walked fast, speaking in low voices. The sun was still shining, but somehow, everything felt darker. Michael stood with the other boys, his hands cold and sweaty. His heart refused to calm down. Every sound made him jump. Every passing teacher made his stomach twist. Daniel stepped closer to him and whispered, "What do we do?" Michael couldn't answer. His throat felt tight. His thoughts were loud and messy. A few minutes later, the principal stepped outside. His face was serious, his voice firm. "I need the following students to come with me," he said, then read out their names. Michael, Daniel, Ethan, Caleb, Jordan. The boys' hearts dropped. Students nearby stared at them, some with concern, some with curiosity, some with judgment. Michael felt like everyone could see his guilt written on his skin. They followed the principal into his office. The room felt too small. The boys sat in a row of chairs, their shoulders stiff, their eyes down. The principal looked at them for a long moment before speaking. "Samuel is on his way to the hospital," he said. "He was badly injured, and he experienced a medical emergency. This is very serious." Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The principal continued, his voice calm but heavy. "Someone needs to tell me exactly what happened." Silence filled the room. The boys stared at the floor, at their shoes, at their shaking hands. Anywhere but at the principal. Michael felt his chest tighten. His mind screamed, "Tell the truth. Say it. This is your fault." But fear held his tongue still. What if they expelled him? What if Samuel died? What if his mother cried because of him? What if his sister stopped looking up to him? The principal leaned forward. "Did Samuel fall by accident?" he asked slowly, "or were you boys involved?" Daniel broke first. His voice cracked as he whispered, It was a prank." The room went still. The principal's eyes sharpened. "Explain." Daniel looked at Michael, begging for help, but Michael felt frozen, unable to move or speak. Daniel continued, his voice shaking. "We took his backpack and hid it in the shed. We didn't know the floor was weak. We didn't know about the insulin. We didn't want him to get hurt. We just wanted to scare him a little." The principal turned his gaze to Michael. "Is this true?" Michael swallowed hard. His voice trembled. "Yes, sir?" The words tasted bitter. It was real now. The principal nodded slowly, not angry, but disappointed in a way that hurt more. "You boys understand that this could have cost someone their life?" Tears filled Michael's eyes. He nodded. One of the teachers stepped in and said quietly, "Samuel's parents have been contacted. Yours will be too. You all need to stay here until they arrive." The boys sat silently waiting. Minutes felt like hours. No one spoke. Some stared into space. Some cried quietly. Some shook with fear. Michael felt like his whole body was sinking. He kept seeing Samuel fall, hearing the crack of the wood, seeing the insulin bottle in his hand. His mind replayed it again and again. Finally, parents began arriving. Ethan's mother rushed in first, upset and confused. Caleb's father came next, speaking in a sharp voice. Jordan's parents whispered angrily as they left the room with him. Then Michael's mother arrived. She looked worried, tired, and confused. When she sat beside him, she asked softly, "Michael, what happened?" Her voice was gentle, but hearing it made his heart break. He lowered his head and whispered, "We played a prank, and Samuel got hurt." His mother closed her eyes, pain filling her face. "Oh, Michael, why?" He didn't have an answer. He didn't know how to explain that he didn't mean it, that he never wanted anyone hurt, that he thought it would be funny, that he ignored the tiny voice that told him to stop. The principal explained the situation, the investigation, and the consequences that might follow. Suspension was possible. Discipline was certain. But everyone was waiting for one thing: news from the hospital. Until they knew whether Samuel would survive, nothing else felt clear. Michael's mother thanked the principal quietly and led him out of the office. As they walked through the hallway, students stared at him. Some whispered. Some shook their heads. Some looked afraid of him. It felt like walking through a storm made of eyes and judgment. When they reached the car, Michael finally broke. He leaned against the seat and cried. Really cried, for the first time in years. His mother put a hand on his shoulder but said nothing. There were no words to fix this. That night, the house felt heavy and silent. Michael sat on his bed, staring at the wall. His sister peeked into the room, confused. "Why are you sad?" she asked softly. Michael couldn't answer. He didn't want her to know. He didn't want her to imagine the terrible thing he had done. When she left, he sat alone, listening to the quiet. Every second felt like waiting for a verdict. Then his mother's phone rang. Michael's heart jumped. She answered it in the hallway. Her voice was low. Then she gasped. Then she sat down. Michael stood up slowly, his body shaking. Mom, what did they say? She looked at him with eyes full of fear and relief mixed together. It's about Samuel, she said softly. Michael held his breath.